clear where we are. And we're going to work our way through into the book today. We'll see how far we get. So we'll start with a prayer. Rick, would you lead us in prayer? All right. So we'll start just with the very first question under the heading of verses 55 to 56. Who was it that was looking on Jesus' crucifixion from the distance? Okay, so yeah, it says there's a group of women, in fact, many women, including the different Marys. And it's interesting, James and John, their mom, we've seen her before, right? Remember, she asked, hey, could you let one of my sons sit on your right hand and one of them sit on your left? But there's something interesting about this. Who's not here? Yeah. It doesn't mention any men at all. Now, we do know from the book of John that John, the apostle, was there nearby. He was close enough for Jesus to look down and to say something to him. But other than John the apostle, we don't read about any other male followers being there. Now that's telling. John is, of course, his best friend on earth. But this book doesn't hold back from telling us about the strength and the faith of women, even sometimes when men fail to do what they should be doing. Do you remember even in the very beginning of the book, in the genealogy, we had 4 women mentioned? That would have been unheard of to mention women in a genealogy, but these 4 women were really important, and they were women of faith. At least 2 of them were great women of faith, as well as Mary. There's a lot of emphasis on her. And so I think it's noteworthy that sometimes in the Bible story that some women outshine men in their faith. The next follower we see is the one who actually comes to bury him. Of course, who is that? Who is the one who goes to bury him? Good. Joseph of Arimathea. And it's pointed out, what about him? He's rich, right? Now, it's pretty rare for Jesus to have wealthy followers. Most of his followers tend to come from the common working people. But it says he himself would become a disciple of Jesus. It's not impossible. People like Joseph, or you got Nicodemus, Zacchaeus as well. There are a few rich people that follow him. But it's significant because of what prophecy? Do you guys remember? You're right, Isaiah. And Isaiah 53 says he would be, even though he's surrounded by criminals, he's going to be with a rich man in his death. And so he's not buried in the grave of just your common murderers and criminals and the homeless and things like that. He's buried in a notable grave that is a brand new tomb, one that was carved out of the rock. We talked about this a little bit in our sermon on Sunday, as well as our last Bible class. Why is it important, besides fulfilling that prophecy, that this tomb was something that was brand new and carved out of the rock? Go ahead. Good. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, you're not going to say, hey, well, here he is, but no, because there's no other body there. He was the only body in that place. Good. And think about it, if he's a rich man, we're not talking some unmarked gravestone, are we? Right? We're talking about probably a prominent grave. something that would be beautiful to look at. Hard to miss, right? They're not going to make a mistake. Now, how is the grave secured? A stone, right? Go ahead. Yeah. So a large stone, and it would have taken less effort to roll it down. It's kind of a slanted depression, but to roll it uphill, rolling something heavy uphill is hard. And so there's another way that it's secured as well. What is that, Jerry? Good. Yeah, so they seal it, and then it's guarded with some Roman soldiers. Now, knowing what we know from other Bible passages, if you're a Roman soldier and you are charged to guard something, what happens if you fail to guard it? Yeah. So, yeah, you're going to either go to jail or more likely be killed if you fail your charge, if you don't take care of what you're there to guard. So it's about as secure as it can get, right? By the way, why did they insist that there be guards there? Go ahead. Yeah, that's exactly right. They said, yeah, he's a trickster, a deceiver, and he said he was going to raise, so his disciples might come in the middle of the night and steal the body, and so he's like, okay, we'll guard this, we'll solve some trouble. Pilate doesn't want any trouble, right, in all of this. So that ends chapter 27. Do you guys have any other thoughts or comments or questions on chapter 27? Harvey? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of interesting to be buried almost like a nobleman after living a life where he actually said, hey, the birds have nests and foxes have holes to live in, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head at night, right? He's someone who he had one set of clothes. That's what they were casting lots for, one main outfit he wore. And it's interesting that he gets buried with a rich man in his death, the way that this grave. Go ahead. Yeah. 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 Good point. Go ahead. Sure. Sure. I guess we don't know. As far as after that, we just don't know. I would say that a lot of times these kind of tombs were like, you go to a cemetery today and like a family owns a certain, is it mausoleum? Is that the right name for it? And so it probably would have been his family tomb. But as far as the Bible story goes, it doesn't tell us anybody else. Go ahead, Maverick. Yep. Yeah. 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 Yep. Yeah, and I mentioned, I think it was Sunday, that we actually do have a bone box like that of Caiaphas, the chief priest who was responsible for killing Jesus, and probably the one who said, hey, they might steal his body. It's funny, we have his body, but we don't have Jesus' body, right? Um, Dave, did you have something different to add to? Good. Yeah. The reason they gave, they might have actually been a little bit worried about it. They knew what happened with Lazarus just a couple of weeks earlier. Yeah, I think there's something to that. They couldn't deny Lazarus, right? They couldn't disprove that. He was in the grave for like 4 days and raised again. Okay. I'd asked you guys to look it up and see if you could find out. In the way that they counted time, when did the next day begin? So the first day of the week began at what time of day? Yeah, so 6 a.m. That tells us why, John mentions it was still dark. This gospel tells us as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week. So it gives us a timetable for what's going to happen on this resurrection day. It's around 6 a.m., and Mary and the other Mary are coming to the grave. This Mary is probably the one from back in chapter 27, verse 55, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph. So that's probably the same Mary we're talking about here. It is possible that could also have been the Mary that was Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. So there's a whole lot of Marys in the Bible story. I don't know if anyone else had a thought about that. I'm not sure it's super clear in this text. So what did they find here in Matthew's gospel when they came to the gravesite? Dave? Yeah, so if you look at all the different accounts, they don't all include the same details. Here we find out what happened is this angel descends and there's an earthquake, and by the time they arrive, like you said, the stone is rolled away, right? And the angel's perched up on top of the stone, right? What does the angel look like? Yeah, this sounds a lot like some of the scary depictions of angels, either in the Old Testament or like the book of Revelation, right? To be in the presence of an angel, they could disguise themselves, and they did sometimes, but when an angel like fully revealed themselves, they were pretty scary, right? So he's dazzling white. They know he's not just a human being here. His clothing is as white as snow. There's something different. Now, by the way, these are trained Roman soldiers. What's their reaction to an angel? Yeah, they're quivering, they're shaking. I want to point out, remember what Jesus said back in chapter 26? How many angels could he call down if he wanted to? Yeah, 12 legions, right? So if one angel can make trained Roman soldiers quiver in their boots, can you imagine if Jesus has 12 legions of angels at his disposal? Think about it. He could have gotten out of there anytime he wanted. So that tells us something about Jesus. He knew what was coming, and he didn't try to get out of it, right? He didn't try to escape the cross and all the pain and torture he went through. So those guys become like dead men. They're like passed out on the ground, right? And so the angel speaks to the women. What does he say? Yeah, that's about all you can say, right? Don't be afraid. This is similar to like when Daniel, in the book of Daniel, sees an angel and he falls on his face, and the angel has to grab him and say, hey, get up, don't be afraid. I'm here to help you. Good. What else does the angel say here? Go ahead. Good. Yeah, one of the happiest things, like they're looking for Jesus. Where is he? Where is he? He's not here. He's risen, right? It's funny, just as he said, and I like that. How many times, I didn't count them all, but Jesus over and over again said, hey, I'm going to go suffer and die, but on the third day I'll raise again. Even at the beginning of his ministry, he said, if you tear down this temple, I'll build it up in 3 days. Like, over and over again, Jesus has been telling him, yeah, I'm going to die, but I'm also going to raise. And so I don't think anybody really it registered for most of them, right? If someone told me, hey, I'm going to raise from the dead next week, Okay, I don't really believe that. You know, that kind of stuff doesn't happen every day. But when the angel tells the women this, what's their level of belief? What do you say? Yeah, they believe. I want to point that out because these women, when presented with evidence and the truth, believe. The disciples are going to take a lot more proof, aren't they? They're going to take a special appearance from Jesus. They're going to have to touch Jesus and feel the wounds. Thomas won't even believe it after the other 10 tell him what they saw. Once again, the faith of these women is actually to be commended, even above some of the good, godly men in the book. Go ahead, Rick. Yeah. Yeah. It seemed like a defeat to the world, right? Everything about this seems like he lost. Normally you kill the enemy and you're like, yeah, I've won the battle, they lost. And so, yeah, I don't know what Satan thought was going to happen. But he certainly was taken off guard after throwing the best he had. It wasn't even enough to touch God's power, right? So the angel says, don't be afraid. The angel says he's not here, he's risen, just like he said he would. And then the angel says one more thing. What was that? Good, yeah, go. And quickly, right? Go quickly, tell his disciples, right? Jerry? Yeah. So remember, yeah, they're down near Jerusalem. And so that's a bit of a walk to run up there to Galilee. So it's some distance. But the disciples had already made that trek, right? They're already back up in one of their home bases, locked up in an inner room. So, go ahead, Harvey. Yeah. 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 And I will say, there was something different about his appearance. We're not really sure what it was. With them, with those two guys, he had a way of disguising himself. And do you remember what it was that made them recognize? Yeah, so it's how he prayed for the food. There was something about how he prayed for the food. They're like, that's Jesus. Jesus is the only one that blesses the bread that way. And when Mary Magdalene first sees Jesus, what does she assume? Yeah, he's a gardener, right? So something about his appearance, it's similar, but it's changed enough. And Jesus has the ability to kind of conceal maybe what they would have expected. However, their faith, they should have trusted, right? They were fearful. When these women heard about it, they believed it right away. Some of the others, Peter and John, and those two on the road to Emmaus, they took a lot more wake-up call. Connie, did you have a hand up? exactly right. And it's interesting. Do you notice the mix of emotion? What are the two emotions that these ladies have as they run to go do what the angel said? Yeah, fear and joy. So like, just in fear, don't think like I'm afraid like from a horror movie, but just like reverence and respect and awe and like, how is this possible? And just, they can't even wrap their minds around what happened. But then this happiness, like it's too good to be true. Like this is better than they ever could have imagined. This mixture of fear and joy. And I'm sure that hurried them along their way faster than they'd traveled on a normal daily basis. Go ahead, Rick. Yeah, and it's neat. They get to see Jesus, right? On the way. Now, Mary Magdalene was the first one that's not mentioned in this gospel, but these ladies get a special appearance from Jesus as they are headed to Galilee to go tell the disciples. And it says they grabbed him and they worshiped him. It's important here to notice this is one of many places where Jesus accepts worship. Actually, Rick and I and Jeff were studying with a guy, and it was kind of news to him. It seemed like that Jesus ever accepted worship. You know, he thought Jesus is a good prophet, Jesus is a good teacher, but this is something different. You know, people who are human in the Bible, they didn't accept worship. That wasn't okay. People were even angels in the Bible. They didn't accept worship. Jesus, people worshiped him. It's a sign that he is divine because you're only supposed to worship God, right? So they know who he is. They recognize he's the Son of God. And so he's worthy of worship. You don't do that to just a prophet or a good man and something like that. Now, Jesus gives them instruction which matches up with the apostles, right? What does he say to them? Yeah, take word to my brethren to leave for Galilee, and there they will see me. So this is, they're heading up there to see, and he's go back to his stomping grounds, right? Away from Jerusalem. And part of this, once again, I think, is to control the timetable of it all. So once he starts getting around and people know, hey, Jesus is alive, you know, he does it very selectively, who he meets with after he raises from the dead. But Galilee is where he chooses to first reveal himself to the majority of people. Do you guys have anything, comments, questions, thoughts up through, this is verse 10 of chapter 28. I guess it's the bottom of page 71. Anything else? Okay, so verse 11 is kind of interesting. Now, while they were on their way, some of the guard came to the city and reported to the chief priests all that had happened. So, can you imagine being those guards? And you've got to say, hey, I don't know if I can really explain this, but there was this loud noise and an earthquake and this bright light, and we passed out, right? I would be scared to tell that story. That's not a story I'd want to tell. Say, you know, the guy we were supposed to be watching, well, by the time we woke up from being passed out, the grave was empty, right? He wasn't there anymore. And So what is kind of the resolution to that? What happens to the guards? Go ahead. Yeah, yeah, a large sum of money. So they're bribed. The Pharisees know if this word gets out, our efforts have failed, right? It had to have been a large sum of money because otherwise their life would be on the line, right, for losing the one they were supposed to be watching. They literally were paid to say, I failed at my job, which is something that a soldier never wanted to admit to. Jerry? Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. Do you remember, and it's actually in the book of Luke, in Luke 16, there's this story of the rich man and Lazarus, and the rich man is in torment, and he tells Abraham, I'll send someone back from the dead to tell my brothers they need to do what's right. And he says, if someone's not doing God's will right now, even someone raising from the dead is not going to change their mind. Now, we like to think that's the biggest proof ever, right? Resurrection. But if someone is dead set on doing what they want to do and not following God's law, even the resurrection is not going to touch them, right? And so today we might say, why is God so hard to find? If he would just do a miracle for me, then I believe, right? No. He's done a lot. And if our heart is so hard that we don't want to listen to God, I don't care. Someone could raise from the dead right in front of me. If I really don't want to do it, I'm not going to do it, right? That's something that being a parent has taught me is just the depth of our stubborn will, right? If somebody doesn't want to do something, they will find a way, and maybe even technically they will do it, but they'll find some way to rebel against it, right? So, for example, I tell my kid, come over here. And they'll say no. I was like, you don't tell me no. Come here. And then, gets on the floor, and he's dragging it. If you're stubborn and you don't want to do something, you're not going to do it, right? And I think the Pharisees have shown it's not a faith issue, right? In fact, there's been enough evidence they can't deny. It's a heart issue. And maybe a lesson for us as we try to share the gospel with people. Sometimes we think we can almost force people to do the right thing. Let me just be honest. If someone's heart's not ready to receive the gospel, nothing you say, no way you change the words is ever going to change their mind. They have to change their mind. They have to change their heart. And so the Pharisees are a good example here. They said, yeah, we'll even lie to the governor. We'll cover it for you. But they know this has gotten out of hand, right? And this is everything they were afraid of. Do you guys have any other thoughts on that? Go ahead, Harvey. Yeah. 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 There's no good military in the world where everybody gets to sleep at the same time. Someone's got to be on watch. So the whole story is bogus. It doesn't make any sense. Rick? Yeah. Yeah. Good. Good. Other thoughts? So it's worth noting that there's value in studying all the different Gospels together because not every one of them tells every resurrection appearance of Jesus. I mentioned on Sunday that if you count them, depending on how you count them, there's around 15 appearances that we know of after his resurrection. So we do end up, in Matthew's account, we skip over the one where they are in the closed room and they get to see Jesus for the first time, and then Thomas comes in. So we skip over those would have already happened. But they show up in Galilee, and where do they head to in Galilee? Mountain. So there's been different thoughts about which mountain this was. Some of them believe it's the same mountain where Jesus had said, "Who do men say that I am?" And where he had, Peter makes that confession that he is the Son of God. There's other debates about which mountain this is as well. But Jesus had specified, here's where I want to meet you. And a lot of his best teaching happens up on mountains, doesn't it? When he delivers laws. But I want you to notice, even after appearing to the women, the men on the road to Emmaus, 2 different times he appeared to the 11, what does it say about some of the disciples' faith? Yeah. Yeah. So some of them are still doubtful. So they all bowed down. They all worshipped, just like the ladies did. But some of them, they had their doubts, right? They had their fears. They didn't quite know 100% what to believe and what to trust in all of this. Recall, Matthew is writing to people proving that from the Old Testament scriptures, Jesus is the promised king, the promised leader. They've all been looking for it for generations. He's the one in charge. He's the one in authority. And so here in this story, it ends with that, right? Jesus, without a shadow of a doubt, very clearly tells them who he is, right? Do you remember how the Sermon on the Mount ended? People marveled at his teaching because he didn't teach like one of their teachers. He taught as somebody who had authority. Now, this is review. What are some of the things that Jesus proved in this book that he had authority over? Death itself, right? There's the big one. Good. What else? Yeah, demons. They're nothing compared to him, right? Even that guy with Legion. What else is he in charge of? Yeah, forgiveness of sins, right? And on that note, he can read people's minds and hearts, right? He knows what the thoughts of their heart are. What are some other things? Yeah, just about any sickness you could think of, they would touch him in the fringe of his garment and they'd be healed. Think about weather, right? He can stop a storm with just a few words. Go ahead. Sure. He can make something from nothing. He has creative power of God. Go ahead. Yeah, that's defying physics, right? But if you're the one that makes the rules of physics and invents them, certainly you could find a way to defy those. It blows my mind to think about it, but all these things, he's in authority, right? But now, without a shadow of a doubt, he's confirming it in what he says, right? I don't think I can read it. Rick, would you read? You got a loud voice, so. Starting in verse 18, I'm sorry, to the end.
And Jesus came and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end.
Okay, perfect. So, all authority has been given to me. He says, I'm king. And where is he king? Heaven and earth, right? You can look at passages like 1 Corinthians 15 where he talks about how God the Father has handed him all rule. He's in charge. Philippians 2 is another good passage. It talks about that. After he raised from the dead, because of his obedience and his faithfulness, God said, you're in charge. You're my king, and you're my king forever, right? Now, it's interesting. After saying, I've got the authority, he gives them some instructions, right? What are his instructions? Yeah. So, teach the things that I've said and baptize them, right? And tell them they need to observe all that I have commanded. So, for us today, I mean, if Jesus says it, we ought to do it. And we've got people today, they're like, yeah, I know what the Bible says, but. Or they'll substitute human tradition for the clearly revealed Word of God. If you're in that kind of a mindset, you don't understand the authority of a king. You know, and I guess in America we love our liberties, we love our, freedoms. The whole intention of our Constitution was that everyone was going to be kind of their own king as far as in their own domain, and my rights are mine, your rights are yours, and as long as I don't mess with your rights and you don't mess with mine, we're all good, right? We don't need some king telling us what to do. So we don't really understand lords and kings and monarchies and things like that. We don't really understand masters and servants and that sort of a thing. We don't truly get authority, because if someone today, your boss, who is in authority over you, tells you something you don't like, you can quit. I mean, you don't have to stay there. You're not legally obligated to stay there, right? Probably the only place that some of this might really stick in our country is the military. Once you submit to that authority, you're under it, and your life is not your own for as long as you're in that service, right? But other than that, most of us just don't understand. But when Jesus says, this is how you do it, like my grandpa talked about how he had to be able to bounce a quarter off of his bed. He had to make his bed so tight in the Marines that you could bounce a quarter off of it, And, you had to be up at a certain time. He did the tear gas room where you had to experience that. You had to be able to hold your breath underwater and eat in 15 minutes. That's all you got or less. Like, there's all these different things. And you couldn't say, I want to take a little longer to eat my food. I don't want to make my bed today. It's a waste. I'll make it messy again tonight. Like, you don't get that, right? When he's in authority, this is what he says. This is how it goes. Do what I commanded you. I'm in charge. Now, I'd rather have him than any drill sergeant or general. He's fair, he's good, he's kind. Recall what he says in Matthew 11, my yoke is easy, my burden is light, right? But nevertheless, he is in charge. So when it comes to baptism or any of his other commands, I don't get a say in it. He tells me his rules. So it's important to recognize by the end of Matthew, he is in charge. He's in authority. Do what he says. Rick?
Following up on the idea of being disciples.
Sure.
We talk about discipleship in the context of the Bible. Really, the top word means Harvard and it really is important to get back to it.
Yeah.
Just like we don't understand a whole lot about the king servant relationship, we don't understand a lot about the leader and disciple relationship.
Yeah.
If we are disciples, we are followers. We're disciplined. They're studying to be a doctor, studying to be a lawyer, studying to be a ghost whatever. We're going to follow a specific kind of teaching mentality method. And I think the reason why we have so much trouble with people submitting to his authority is understand a disciple says, I will do it your way. I'm following you and watching you to learn how you do it so that I can do it that way. And so there's a clash here.
Yeah.
If we somehow think we are disciples, but we are not submitting to his authority, those two are mutually losing. Discipleship and authority must be together. Take one out, you don't have another on that.
Yeah.
And that's why we get in trouble a lot. Arguing about doctors, I think, no, I'm a disciple. What did the master say? And okay, that's what I do.
Good. Yeah, I like that point. And at its root, a disciple is just a learner. You might think about a student. I think there's, like you said, there's this idea of when you major in something, you get good at it, you devote your study to it. But the idea that you don't just become a Christian and then I'm good and walk away from your faith, right? You're a lifelong learner. And we need to think about ourselves that way. Christian, that word is a good way to describe us because we're Christ-like. A believer, I mean, we have faith. But a disciple is somebody who's always learning. And so that's why this church here prioritizes Bible study, both in our homes and in our assemblies, because we understand we're always learning. And it doesn't matter if you're 8 or 80, you should always be learning, right? A lifelong learner. He ends, though, this section. Oh, go ahead, Harvey. That's a very good point. Yeah, they abandoned him. They walked away. They were disbelieving. And he says, no, you guys are the ones I chose to bring my word to the world. That's a very good point. It says a lot about his faith in people, right? He sees the best in these disciples, and he knows the good kind of things they're going to be able to do. Maverick? Sure. Yeah. 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 And you think about, like, final words. If like your last conversation with someone, you say some of the most important stuff, right? You like, this is the last time I get a chance to talk to you. Here's what I want to share with you. He picks it at the very end. You know, why? Because it's a priority. Good. Very good. I want to end with this last saying of Jesus. He ends with a message of comfort, right? There's still some that are doubtful, but what does he say to give them some comfort here at the end? To him? Yeah, I'm always with you, right? I'm with you till the end of the age. And that's powerful. That he knows they're going to do some hard things. They're going to come up against some opposition. The book of Acts is full of it, right? They'll be beaten up, dragged into prison. Some of them will have their heads cut off. But what do we find here? Jesus says, I'm with you. And, you know, we need to remember the same, right? If we're following his commands, doing his will, sometimes it leads to some hard things. But a belief that he is with us in whatever we do is important. Go ahead. Yes, yeah. Yes, yeah. And I would say that's, and to the end of this this physical world, this existence, right? Yeah, until he comes back. Yep, I think you're right. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Good. Okay, so I want to make sure you guys know the plan. So Sunday night, we're going to continue working in the big picture of the Bible. Those sheets are up here if you have not got it yet, and the books are up there. But we'll be doing the first sheet of questions. I doubt we will get through them all, but we will start going through them. That's for Sunday night. For next Wednesday night, I have sheets up here now that are for the book of Ephesians. And Rick is going to start teaching that next Wednesday. The very first lesson is right here. Once again, I don't know at what pace he's going to go through it, but he will be starting with the intro. But those questions are right here. Thanks, everybody. I did. I have a little bit of voice left.
sing. Only thou art holy. There is none beside thee. Perfect in heart and love and purity. Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty. All thy works shall praise thy name in earth and sky and sea. Holy, 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 merciful and mighty, God over all, and blessed eternally. The song of invitation is number 515. So my invitation tonight comes from a discussion I've been having with somebody about something we hear a lot is calling on the name of the Lord. It's scripted. There's places you hear that. And we were talking about that. We talked about at least 3 verses, and I don't have them to give to you because I left my paper on my desk at work where I wrote stuff down. So I'm sort of going off of that. But those 3 verses that I come up with, you'll find out you kind of see that they're all the same tense, and they're all future tense. And it says that when you call in the name of the Lord, you shall be saved, or you will be saved. And in my mind, as we were talking about, why does it not say, call on the name of the Lord, you are saved? So we got to thinking about that and looking and talking about it. And so in my mind is, I was raised a scientist, so I started asking questions. That's why in school. So my question is, when is the future in that? And what is it? What does it entail? So we decided that, let's look for, is there a place where it's present tense when when it happens, when they're calling on the Lord? And so we looked, and basically the one we came up to was the Acts 22 in verse 16, Paul's conversion, when he's actually talking about it, the one where he is giving the intimate detail. And if you look, that is that point in its present. And it says, look in 22:16. And we know this leading up to this that Jesus appears before Paul, tells him he has something to do with him, and blinds him, and then tells him to seek out a man named Ananias. And then also Ananias is told that this guy that murdered Christians is coming to see you, and I have a reason for it, and you need to help him out. But that exchange happens. And then Paul says himself, these are the words of Paul describing what happened to him in 16. He said, and Ananias is saying this, now why do you wait? Rise and be baptized and wash away your sins, calling on his name. There is the present tense instead of the future tense. So tonight, I guess my question to you is somebody who may not be in the body of Christ. The question that Ananias asks. Now why do you wait? Rise up, be baptized, wash away your sins, calling on his name. That's what we need to do. We need to allow God to save us from our sins. Paul being the most influential, in my mind, the most influential apostle, he gave us most of what we do in our New Testament, most of the accounts that we read. Somebody said, well, calling on his name. What is calling on his name? Do you call on something you don't believe in? Do you call on something that you don't listen to? That's all part of what's going on here with Paul. So tonight, if you're ready to be a Christian, you want to be baptized in the body of Christ and your sins washed away. Or if you are struggling, we even know Paul struggled too later on. After all, Paul prayed a lot, asked for help. struggling, you are a member of the body of Christ. If you're struggling, it's amazing. We want to help you. Help pray with you, and help pray to God. Give you strength in sin. So tonight, if you need our help, come forward now as we stand.
Verse 5:15.
Encamped along the hills of mighty Christian soldiers rise, and rush the battle ere the night shall veil the glowing skies. Against the foe in veils below, let all our strength be hurled. Faith is the victory we know, that overcomes the world. Faith is the victory, faith is the victory. Oh, glorious victory that overcomes the world. His banner over us is love, our sword, the word of God. We tread the road the saints above with shouts of triumph.